What a way to ring in the new year. For WWE's first live show of the decade since NXT was taped on Wednesday, I thought this was a pretty good episode of SmackDown overall, and far better than anything else we've seen on this show in quite some time. It's honestly a tale of two shows, because I just got done talking about a week ago when I was reviewing the last SmackDown of 2019, really the last SmackDown of the decade, and what a fitting way to close it out, because the show sucked overall. As almost every other installment of SmackDown has since they moved to Fox 3 months ago. I talked about how nothing ever really happens on this show. It's the same revolving door of people at the top. I mean, we have The Fiend, which is nice, and the Daniel Bryan feud, which has been, entertaining overall so far. The Roman and Corbin stuff has been downright deplorable. There is no real mid-card on the brand. The Braun and Nakamura stuff doesn't really do much for me personally. The New Day don't really have rivals at the moment over the SmackDown Tag Team titles, or at least they didn't before this past week. And then that was about it. The women's division has been fine. Lacey Evans is getting over as a babyface, Bayley and Sasha doing their thing, and the well runs dry beyond those people. Because Dana Brooke is not that good, and Carmella is and then they're doing the whole Mandy and Otis thing, which is cool. But other than a few select things, it never really felt like much of importance was happening on SmackDown going into the new year. And then last night happened, which overall was a very newsworthy night. 3 notable returns, and then a major heel, and maybe not a major, but a significant heel turn as well. So overall, again, I really enjoyed this episode of SmackDown for January 3rd, 2020. It's going to take me a while to get used to saying 2020, so bear with me. I am Graham Jason Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well. This is my weekly SmackDown audio review for both the nextdaywrestling.net and the YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, check out all my other audio reviews of SmackDown from the last few months, since Wrestle Rant Radio goes up on Thursdays. And by the way, thanks to everyone for the awesome feedback on the new logo for Wrestle Rant Radio. I appreciate it. That's courtesy of Alexis. She put that together about a month or so ago, and I was finally able to debut it for the new decade a couple days ago. But since Wrestle Rant Radio goes up on Thursdays, I don't really have time to talk about SmackDown on the show, so I kind of make time on Saturdays to review the show from Friday night. And this one was definitely worth talking about. I thought overall this was, again, a very good show. We opened the episode with Lacey Evans and Dana Brooke facing off against Bayley and Sasha Banks, and then Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross in a triple threat tag team match. Why? Because why? There's no real reason why. I can't answer that question. Lacey Evans and Dana Brooke versus Sasha and Bayley would have made sense, considering the stuff we've seen between the two teams in recent weeks. Bayley beat Dana Brooke 2 weeks in a row on SmackDown last month. Lacey faced Sasha 2 weeks ago on the show. Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross, they hosted Lacey Evans on Moment of Bliss. That's really the only reason why they were involved in this match, and thankfully they kind of explained it before the match. They were all given mic time, which was nice. Everyone except for, I think, Dana Brooke, I believe, got mic time before the match, which I thought was nice. But Nikki and Alexa said the only real reason why they were in this match was because they want to get back in the WWE Women's Tag Team title hunt. So other than that, there really was no reason for them to be here, but the match was fine as is. With them, without them, I really don't think it would have made much of a difference. But this was fine for what it was. And I think we actually had Lacey and Dana versus Sasha and Bayley last week. I honestly don't really remember. So maybe adding Alexa and Nikki in their mind was their way of changing it up and not giving us the same match 2 weeks in a row. But these ladies were given a ton of time. They were given about 13, 14 minutes maybe. They dominated the first half an hour of this show between the promos and then the match itself. This took up the first half hour of SmackDown, which I liked. Because the SmackDown women's division, I don't really think has been, not that Raw's much better, if better at all. But I don't really feel like SmackDown's women's division is really lighting the world on fire at the moment. Bayley and Sasha, I think, are doing great work. Lacey's getting over as a babyface. But again, beyond those three, the well runs dry, like I said earlier. We have Carmella, we have Dana Brooke, we have Mandy and Sonya, who are doing their thing at the moment with Otis, which is fine. But that's really about it. And there might be another name or two I'm not thinking about. We have Alexa and Nikki, but they're kind of more of a tag team and not singles competitors at the moment. So I'm glad what they did here. I was happy with what they did here with the women, giving them time for their match, letting it be a solid match. It was far from a barn burner, but for what it was, that it was a very solid triple threat tag team match with the right team going over. And I thought it would be Lacey pinning Bayley to earn herself a future shot at the SmackDown Women's Championship. It was actually Dana Brooke who pinned Sasha Banks for the victory. If that's not a fitting way to kick off the new decade and all the unpredictability that is soon to follow, I don't know what would be. Dana Brooke pinning Sasha Banks in the first live match on WWE TV of the decade. That's quite amazing, if I do say so myself. But I thought this was good. We then had Elias performing, which was kind of a waste of time. I like Elias, and don't get me wrong, I'm kind of sort of happy that they turned him back into a babyface, because he was getting over in that role about a year and a half ago before they suddenly turned him back heel for no, again, apparent reason at all. Inexplicably, he went back to being a heel overnight in early 2019 after not really getting a real run as a babyface. But he is now. The only issue is that he's not really doing anything. He's just singing songs week after week, weak songs at that. The songs work better as a heel. I guess it's something different because he was stale as a heel anyway, so I guess it's a bit better that he's a babyface. I don't really necessarily agree with that. It's nice to see him switching it up a little bit, but the songs aren't anything entertaining. It's really just filler ahead of the Royal Rumble, if nothing else. He doesn't have a feud right now. He's just kind of there on the show, to be honest with you. But this was, it was fine. I just don't really see the point of having Elias parading him out there to sing his songs and whatnot. And by the way, I'm still kind of sick from the last couple of days, so if my voice sounds shoddy, that's why. But anyway, we had Shorty G taking on Dash Wilder. Well, first we were shown a video package, not a video package, but rather an interaction between Shorty G and Dash Wilder from earlier on in the day, where the Revival were picking on Chad Gable. I don't even really know why I'm saying Shorty G, because the Shorty G name is fucking terrible, but they were picking on Chad Gable backstage, who offered to face Dash Wilder in one-on-one action. Now, Gable and the Revival have plenty of history between their battles over the Raw Tag Team titles a year ago, when it was Chad Gable and Bobby Roode facing the Revival. They even had history as of a couple weeks ago, when the Revival beat Chad Gable and Mustafa Ali in tag team action. And I'll talk more about Ali in a moment. But we had, those matches between Gable and the Revival a few weeks ago. But I think their history dates all the way back. It's safe to say all the way back to NXT a few years ago. 4 years ago, actually. It's crazy to think that now. Back in 2016, the Revival and American Alpha were trading wins over the NXT Tag Team titles back in NXT in 2016. So these two teams, not teams, but like Gable and the Revival have plenty of history. So I was happy that was acknowledged here. The actual match really wasn't anything of note, but I thought it was fine for what it was. Gable went over decisively, as he should have. And then the Revival attacked Gable afterwards. So I figured this would be when Ali would come out, make the save, setting up a future tag team match, as we saw a month ago between Gable and Ali in the Revival, which their first match was great. So I'm all for the idea of Gable and Ali versus the Revival, but that's clearly not the direction they're going in. We saw a video package last week on Ali, kind of recapping how disappointing his 2019 was for him and the opportunities he missed out on and all that other stuff. I thought it was a great video package, so clearly they're grooming Ali again to be a singles guy. Then again, they were doing that over the summer, and they brought him back only to do nothing, so maybe that doesn't really mean much at all. I guess we'll soon see. But instead, Sheamus comes out, who we've seen it for the past month or so on SmackDown via video packages proclaiming that SmackDown has become weak in his absence and all this other stuff. We have not seen Sheamus on WWE TV since April, actually. He was on WrestleMania. He was on the Raw after WrestleMania. And then I don't think he was on the SmackDown after Mania. He might have been. If he was, regardless of whether he was or he wasn't, that was the last week that he was on WWE TV. Was right after WrestleMania. And he has not been seen since because he got hurt. He was kind of rehabbing various injuries. I guess he had some sort of a neck injury, something similar to what Edge had years ago. So thankfully he's good to go. He's back now. I mean, we've known he was going to be returning for about a month or so because they've been running these video packages week after week on the show since late November, since the Black Friday episode. But he finally resurfaced here, seemingly to save Gable from the Revival, and he did fend off the Revival, only to turn around and lay out Gable with a bro kick. I thought this was great. It brought back memories of when Sheamus returned the last time in 2015, almost exactly 5 years ago, after WrestleMania 31, seemingly as a babyface, again, because he was a babyface before he left, only to turn heel on Daniel Bryan and Dolph Ziggler. I think he fended off Wade Barrett or something like that, and then he turned around and laid out Bryan with a bro kick. Bryan, I think either Bryan and Dolph Ziggler or just one or the other, I don't really remember. But that was a great turn. This was great too. I mean, I kind of figured he would be a heel upon his return. He kind of came across like a heel in those aforementioned video packages. But I thought this was really well done. Great to see Sheamus back. I've never really been the biggest Sheamus fan. But I was thinking the other day, because I rewatched the final Raw of 2009 with Alexis last weekend, because I was at that show, first of all, and then we went to the final Raw of 2019, almost exactly 10 years later, in the same exact building in Hartford, believe it or not. But it got me thinking while watching Sheamus on that Raw where he faced John Cena for the WWE Championship, and he actually stood tall in the final WWE show of that decade, and now he returns in the first SmackDown of this decade. That he's been around for over 10 years. That's a long time. And again, there's a lot of people in the company now that have been around for over 10 years. You know, Kofi Kingston, Dolph Ziggler, even fucking Zack Ryder has been around for 10 years, never to be released. Like Drew McIntyre debuted over 10 years ago, but he got cut, got brought back, so that's not consecutively 10 years. Ryder, Kofi, Dolph, Sheamus, and a few others, more than you would think actually, have been around in the company for over 10 years, never really getting hurt. The Miz is another one. And the guy has been a constant in WWE throughout that entire period. Former WWE champion, World Heavyweight champion, United States champion, multi-time tag team champion, Mr. Money in the Bank, King of the Ring, Royal Rumble winner. The guy has really done it all, I think, except for win the Intercontinental Championship, which I know he is a goal of his. He's actually talked about that in interviews before and on Twitter before. So hopefully it's not long before he gets inserted into the Intercontinental Championship picture. And honestly, it'd be kind of cool if they built to, now that I'm thinking about it, if Braun beats Shinsuke for the championship. Probably at the Rumble. Let's just assume that. If Braun is the new champion coming out of the Rumble, I think a Braun-Sheamus program at WrestleMania. Excuse me, Jesus. The cough's coming back. A Sheamus Braun program at WrestleMania, heading into WrestleMania over the Intercontinental Championship, would be a great use of both guys. Braun really hasn't had that one important WrestleMania match. He's been in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal a few times. He won it last year. He faced the fucking Bar 2 years ago for the World Tag Team titles when he lost to, what was it? No, he won, but it was with the 10-year-old Nicholas and that whole dumb angle. I was not a fan of it then. I'm not a fan of it now. So he really hasn't had an important WrestleMania match. And a lot of people have given up on Braun, me being among them. I don't really care as much about him now as I did a year or two ago. That being said, though, I do like the idea of a Braun and Sheamus Intercontinental Championship match at WrestleMania. He laid out Gable here. Obviously, that's not going to be a full-fledged feud. I like the idea of a Gable-Sheamus feud for a few different reasons. First of all, Sheamus is a great bully heel, as he was when he first came back 5 years ago as a heel. He plays that role so fucking well. That and Gable, he's doing this whole rise over size thing right now, which is so fucking dumb. It's so like, I mean, I'm sure there are sexual implications there that they were like, like, what's that? Like sexual innuendo? What's the word that I'm looking for here? That it wasn't like subtle. They were hoping for it to be subtle, but it's really not. Like, oh, they won't get this, subtle joke that it's a sex thing like it obviously is. Even if it's not, it just sounds stupid regardless. The whole Shorty G bullshit is just that. It's stupid bullshit. But I do like the idea of a Sheamus Gable feud because they could have some really, really good matches if given the time to go out there and have the matches they're capable of. That being said, though, I think the long game here should be Sheamus running through Gable, obviously the end game here is not for Gable to be pushed on his own. Let's not fucking kid ourselves. It's been years and they have yet to do that. I think the end game here should be Sheamus running through Gable, not winning the Rumble, obviously, but maintaining momentum ahead of a future Intercontinental Championship match with Braun Strowman at WrestleMania. Hashtag book it. I think it'd be really cool to see. And hey, it would be better than Sheamus and Daniel Bryan again. Because we all know that's been Vince's fucking wet dream for WrestleMania for years now. We got it in 2011 at WrestleMania on the dark in the dark match in the pre-show, whatever. It was supposed to be in the main card. They bumped it. We got it again at WrestleMania 28 over the World Heavyweight Championship. We didn't get it at WrestleMania 29, but they did plan on doing it at WrestleMania 30. And I know that for a fucking fact because CM Punk tweeted out a picture of the original WrestleMania card right before he left. It was like a memo from the company. And on said card was Sheamus versus Daniel Bryan. And Bryan had said as much in his book and other places. In case you didn't believe him, it says so in the print there that Punk tweeted out or put on his Instagram, whatever, last night, that it was supposed to be Sheamus and Bryan at WrestleMania 30. Thank God we did not get that, and we got what we did instead. And I think they were going to do it again at WrestleMania 31. Sheamus, they held off on him being back in time for WrestleMania. They brought him back the night after Mania instead. But I think at one point, they were going to do a Sheamus-Daniel Bryan match again at WrestleMania 31, and then next it then, because Bryan ended up winning the Intercontinental Championship instead. I'm not sure if they plan on doing it after. Actually, they couldn't plan on doing it after that because Bryan was out for WrestleMania's 32 because he was hurt, and then 33, obviously still injured. He was retired at that point. And then 34, he came back. Sheamus was doing the thing on Raw, so they were separated by the brand split. And then at WrestleMania 35, Bryan was the WWE champion, and Sheamus was doing the tag team thing. But now that Sheamus is back on his own, it's very possible they might be building the Sheamus and Bryan at WrestleMania. God, I fucking hope not. No, thank you. 10 years ago, it would have been fine. I was okay with it. All these years later, it's time to move on. Bryan deserves better. As the Sheamus, I think the Sheamus-Braun feud is a good place for him. For Bryan, not really sure what you do with him at WrestleMania if he's not facing the Fiend again for the Universal Championship, which I don't think he will. They were teasing Bryan and Roman in a backstage segment last night. I don't really think we get that at Mania. I think it's more likely we get that at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, a lot like we saw at Fastlane 5 years ago. It's like 2015 all over again. But anyway, I like the segment for what this was. We then had Kofi Kingston versus The Miz. And if it sounds random, it kind of was, but it made sense via the backstage segment that preceded the match that saw The Miz, sulking backstage over the losses that he's endured to Daniel Bryan and Bray Wyatt in recent months. And I had to look it up because Alexis brought up to me, she asked while we were watching the show, she said, when was the last time The Miz won an important one-on-one match? So I went back on Pro Fight DB, and he has not won, get this, a televised singles match on WWE TV since fucking September. September 10th, when he beat Andrade, right before the Clash of Champions pay-per-view the following weekend. That's fucking terrible. For a guy of his stature to have not won a single one-on-one match. Yeah, he won that tag team match with Daniel Bryan 2 weeks ago at the show that I was at in Brooklyn. Other than that, though, he has not won a match, period, let alone a singles match, since he beat Andrade 4 months ago. That's terrible. And he lost it again here, too. It was a good match. Kofi and Miz have always worked well together. I remember their initial matches against each other over 10 years ago. In 2009, they were feuding over the United States Championship. They feuded over the Intercontinental Championship a few years after that. They feuded over the tag team titles. They have feuded quite a bit over the past decade. And now it seems like they're feuding again over the tag team championships as Kofi Kingston won here. Miz snapped afterwards, effectively turning heel in the process. Now, I'm of two minds in this whole thing. They fucked up the Miz babyface run. I said this years ago. I'm going to say it again now. The Miz can and has worked well as a babyface. He did the first time. People shat all over it then, but it was because he didn't have direction. He works well as a babyface, and yes, he's obviously a natural heel. I get it. He works well as a babyface when given direction. He was given direction earlier on in 2019 in the feud with Shane, which early on, many people may forget this, but it was like the best thing going on SmackDown, leading it. I mean, maybe not the best thing, because the whole Kofi Mania thing was great. But Miz was doing great work as a babyface going into WrestleMania 35 last year. And the whole feud with Shane was very entertaining. And then he lost, and he lost again, and he lost again, and then he did nothing for the remainder of 2019. I actually had to look it up. The Miz has not won a match on pay-per-view since Royal Rumble last year. So exactly a year ago, he won a match at the Royal Rumble when he and Shane actually won the SmackDown Tag Team titles. He has not won a match on pay-per-view since then, which is absolutely terrible. He has probably not won a singles match on pay-per-view. God, I want to say since the Rumble, maybe? Not the Rumble, I'm sorry, SummerSlam of 2018 when he beat Daniel Bryan. Because he lost to Bryan after that at Super Showdown. I know he and Maurice beat Bryan and Brie at the Hell in a Cell show, but that was a tag team match. He lost at Survivor Series. Don't think he was at TLC. Lost at Super Showdown to Daniel Bryan. So yeah, I think the last singles match he's won on pay-per-view was over a year and a half ago. Again, that's terrible. So I will say this again, like I said on Twitter last night. The Miz could have and should have and would have worked as a babyface had they not fucked him up. And the lack of good booking for this guy really did him in. So that being said, I'm not mad at the heel turn just because he needed something. The guy was floundering. The Wyatt match at TLC was not good. He lost then too. He needed something. The heel turn works. And to make matters even better, it appears that we're headed towards a tag team feud with The Miz and John Morrison versus The New Day. I like that idea quite a bit. Now, that was pitched by a few different people. We all kind of assumed that when Morrison came back, SmackDown would be a logical landing spot for him because Raw is kind of stockpiled with superstars right now, as is NXT. And I mean, I think NXT would have been a good spot for him, a lot like when Drew McIntyre came back. He went to NXT and did really well over there. But NXT already has enough star power. They don't really need John Morrison. SmackDown needs John Morrison. SmackDown needed more depth in their mid-card ranks, and Morrison fills that spot very, very well. Not only that, but there's a logical thing for him to do there with The Miz. We have not seen him team with The Miz in just about a decade, actually. They haven't done much other than just feud. In Morrison's final years with the company, they just feuded back and forth over the WWE Championship and a few other times over like the tag team titles and shit. I don't think they ever really reunited. They had their breakup over a decade ago in 2009 at the draft, and they never reunited after that, I don't believe, because Morrison was a babyface after that, and Miz never went back to being, was always a heel. He never went back to being, or never turned babyface until after Morrison had left the company. So anyway, I love the idea of a Miz and Morrison reunion facing the New Day for the SmackDown Tag Team titles. I really like that a lot, actually. The segments can be entertaining. Morrison came across like a babyface in the few seconds that we saw him for in that backstage segment on SmackDown last night when Kathy Kelly knocked on Miz's dressing room door. John Morrison answered, and he said, "The Miz really isn't in a place to talk right now. He'll talk to you next week," or whatever he said. And then he shut the door, and that was it. So he kind of came across like a babyface, and maybe he will be initially, but The Miz is clearly a heel if his post-match actions and mannerisms were any indication. Morrison will probably head for a heel turn too, which honestly is the best role for him. He was a good babyface when he left the company 9 years ago, but he has always worked better as a heel. He did in WWE, he did in Impact, he did in Lucha Underground. Morrison has always been a better heel, a lot like Miz, where he's, popular, he can get over as a babyface, but his strongest work has always come as a heel. So again, I love the idea of a Miz and Morrison reunion facing the New Day for the SmackDown Tag Team titles, hopefully at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. That's WrestleMania worthy, but I would be fine with them doing it at the Rumble because you can't keep Morrison on ice forever. I mean, the guy's been back with the company now reportedly since September, and they've done nothing with him until now. So I like this idea a lot, and I'm looking forward to seeing, hopefully, the New Day versus the Dirt Sheet Duo at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. We then had Otis taking on Drew Gulak, a kind of a throwaway match, but a standard squash match for Otis. Gulak is still doing the nonsensical, stupid, dumb PowerPoint presentations, which were cute 2 years ago. In 2020, they're just fucking dumb. After what we after what we saw from this guy in 2019 on NXT and 205 Live, he was doing excellent work. And then they ruined him when they booted him from 205 Live and put him on SmackDown. I was slightly optimistic when they moved him to SmackDown just because, okay, he's done everything in the Cruiserweight division. Maybe they'll do something with him on SmackDown, but nope. Just fucking jobbing. So that's pretty bad. But anyway, though, it's not like Humberto Carrillo, who was moved from 205 Live to Raw, and he's done very well for himself. Even Akira Tozawa. has done better for himself he hasn't won any matches per se, but still, he's had a lot of TV time on Raw. He's on the show almost every single week. And, the guy has done very well for himself since moving from 205 Live to Raw. The same cannot be said for Drew Gulak, who's been completely wasted on SmackDown. Hopefully that changes at some point. I'm not getting my hopes up. But on the other side, though, on the flip side, the Otis Mandy Rose storyline has been great so far. Very entertaining. Looking forward to seeing where it goes. Otis playing his role remarkably well, as is Mandy. The acting isn't always great, but you can't help but root for Otis. He's such a likable fucking guy, and he is perfectly positioned in this program. Heavy Machinery were already getting over as a tag team on their own, but the Mandy thing will only help with that. The guy is very entertaining, so I'm liking that storyline. Not so much liking what they're doing with Drew Gulak right now, or really not doing, to be exact. We then had Braun Strowman versus Cesaro. Solid match here, nothing too great, but it was a good match. Strowman going over, as he probably should have after pinning Nakamura in the tag team match last week. So I would assume this is setting up Strowman and Nakamura for the Intercontinental Championship at the Rumble in a couple weeks, which would make the most sense. And like I said, I would assume Strowman wins. If he can't beat Nakamura, the guy is the biggest loser in the world. He already kind of is, after losing to Tyson Fury, Seth Rollins, lost to, who else did he lose to in 2019? He won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, but the guy was such a fucking loser. He never really did much of note last year. Lost to Brock Lesnar, lost to this guy, lost to that guy. Jesus Christ, he's such a fucking loser. And he should be much better than that. But anyway, if he can't win that championship, you might as well just quit, dude. There's no salvaging you then. But I do assume that he wins the championship at the Rumble, or whenever the match takes place. Probably at the Rumble. That's when I would save it for. Then we had the main event, pitting Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan against King Corbin and Dolph Ziggler in tag team action. Kind of a ho-hum main event. Nothing really worth writing home about here. The flurry of offense, the hot comeback from Daniel Bryan was pretty cool. Bray Wyatt ended up interrupting the match. The lights went out. They come back on. He teased before a commercial break coming out, and he didn't. And then he ended up coming out towards the end of the match. The lights go out. They come back on. The Fiend attacks Daniel Bryan, throws him into the barricade, one of the least reinforced barricades I've ever seen. He went through that thing way too easily. Daniel Bryan's not heavy at all. So the fact that he went fucking crashing through the barricade, it was comical, but it was a cool angle to further the feud between Bryan and the Fiend. I thought that was well done. But that wasn't all. Bryan was out at ringside. We see Roman out, laid out by Corbin and Ziggler in the middle of the ring. The match was effectively a no contest, which I think it was officially deemed on the website. I don't really remember, but the match kind of sort of ends without a proper conclusion. And Roman is about to get embarrassed by Corbin and Ziggler via dog food, which we've heard about before. We've heard all the rumors that coming up in the live events in February, it's Corbin and Roman in a fucking loser eats dog food match, which sounds so terrible. So terrible. The feud just sucks. But before they could do that, we hear the Usos music, who we have not seen since August. And it wasn't because of the DUI. I'm sure that was a factor. But they were on TV after the DUI. They actually went for the Raw Tag Team titles on an episode of Raw before SummerSlam last year. The OC won the titles from the Revival, and the Usos were in the match too, in a triple threat tag team match. So they were on TV since the DUI. They just have not been used since then. They weren't involved in the draft, but it looks like they're on SmackDown, which is good. I like the idea of them with Roman Reigns a lot, because we've seen this before. We haven't really seen Roman with the Usos in, maybe since 2016, since the OC versus Roman and Usos feud in the spring of 2016, because they've always been separated by the brand split. Roman was always on Raw, and the Usos were always on SmackDown. And then when the Superstar shakeup happened earlier this year, the Usos went to Raw and Roman went to SmackDown. And they may have had one match together against maybe Shane or in the bar, or not the bar. It was fucking Shane and the Revival maybe, and Drew. I don't really remember. But other than that, they have really been separated by the brand split stuff over the last 4 years. So to see them back together, I thought was really, really cool. Roman works well with people like Ambrose and Rollins and the Usos. Roman is very good. He's great. Roman is great, but I think he works even better when he's associated or kind of put together with his friends in the Shield or the Usos or whatever, when he has other people around him. So I thought this was great. The Usos come out, they lay out Dolph, they cause Corbin to leave the ring, and then it's Roman and the Usos standing tall to end the show. So again, 3 major returns on one episode of SmackDown is very impressive between the Usos, John Morrison in that backstage segment, and who was the other person? Sheamus, obviously. And then we had The Miz turning heel. This was a very newsworthy episode of SmackDown, probably the most newsworthy since the NXT invasion 2 months ago. And then before that, you would have to go all the way back to the Fox debut 3 months ago. I really enjoyed this episode. I saw people saying, oh, you take away the returns, the show's not good. Well, no shit, because that was the show. What else did you even really have on the show? Strowman and Cesaro was solid. It wasn't a great match, but it was good for what it was and furthered the feud between Strowman and Cesaro. Granted, the main event was nothing, again, anything special, but it did what it set out to do in, furthering Bryan and Wyatt, and then Roman had the Usos save him, which was cool. Otis and Gulak was exactly what it needed to be. And I like the Otis and Mandy Rose storyline they're doing right now. Kingston and Miz wasn't anything, again, special either, but it did set forth the Miz heel turn and plant the seeds for a future Miz and Morrison versus New Day match, which I like a lot. Shorty G and Dash Wilder was okay, but it did set up the Sheamus return and likely a Sheamus versus Gable feud. The Alliance performance was really the only real waste of time on this show. Then the opening women's tag team match was good too. So overall, I really liked the show. I enjoyed the episode of SmackDown. Whether they can keep the momentum rolling remains to be seen. Yeah, obviously you can't do returns every single week, but they really jam-packed the first episode of SmackDown of the new decade, and it paid off. I enjoyed the episode overall, very much so. So the Royal Rumble is coming up in a few short weeks. I'm at the end of the month, and so far, very few superstars have thrown their name into the hat for both the men's and women's Royal Rumble matches. I think Natalya might be part of the women's. We know Charlotte's in it, maybe Natalya too. And then we found out last night Roman Reigns has been announced for the men's Royal Rumble match. Other than that, we know nothing about either Rumble, which honestly doesn't really bother me because we know all the losers will end up entering it anyway. So it's not really that big of a deal. But I'm looking forward to that. And they have a couple good storylines now on SmackDown I can get invested in with Mandy and Otis. They have the Morrison Miz thing going now, Bryan and The Fiend. Corbin and Reigns is still fucking dumb, but at least the Usos are involved now, so that could make matters interesting. And we could end up getting an Usos versus Bobby Roode and Dolph Ziggler match when Roode comes back from his suspension at some point. So yeah, again, I like the lay of the land right now on SmackDown. They really needed all the people they brought back. They needed Morrison, they needed Sheamus, and they needed the Usos. SmackDown needs far more star power right now than Raw does. Raw, I think, is doing pretty okay for themselves. They have star power on Raw, but they also have a lot of people I can get excited about seeing. People like Cedric Alexander and Ricochet and Aleister Black and Buddy Murphy. You didn't really have too many of those people on SmackDown. There's really not many exciting tag teams or mid-card guys on SmackDown. But you have that now with the Usos, Sheamus, and Morrison, and probably soon more to follow, which I like a lot. So again, not to say this was the greatest SmackDown of all time or anything, but I really enjoyed the episode. And I'm, hoping, fingers crossed, that we can get, this is a sign of things to come in 2020 for the Blue Brand, and that I hope we can get more shows like this in the future. So thank you guys, as always, for checking out my audio review of Friday Night SmackDown from last night. Very much appreciate it. Despite the fact I am still under the weather, clearly by the, sound of my voice, and I'm still congested a little bit. Hopefully it does get better in the days to come. But again, always appreciate you guys checking out and taking the time to listen to my reviews of SmackDown and everything else here on the channel. I might be putting up a miscellaneous video on Sunday. I'm not exactly sure yet. I'm pretty sure anyway, there's a new series debuting on the network on, forgot what it's called, but it's focusing on Drew McIntyre. Not Untold, it was something else. That's going up tomorrow on the network, so I might be breaking that down on Monday on WWE Network and Chill. Either way, though, we put up content almost every single day right here on the channel. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, like this video, drop a comment, and share the video. All that stuff is greatly appreciated. So on that note, guys, have a great rest of your weekend. I'm Graham GSM Matthews. I'll be right back here, hopefully next Saturday, with another all-new review of Friday Night SmackDown in audio form. Until then, guys, have a great one, and I'll catch your ass down the road.